7 words, 8 seconds of silence, and one question that stunned the White House on live TV. The White House sent its sharpest economic mind to break Mark Carney on live television. It lasted 41 minutes, and the United States has not recovered since. The decision was deliberate, the strategy clear, and the outcome a catastrophe that diplomats are still struggling to process. Howard Lutnick, Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary, the man who rebuilt Cantor Fitzgerald from the ashes of September 11th, the man the administration publicly called the most formidable negotiator in the cabinet, was dispatched to confront the Canadian Prime Minister on the BBC. Not a joint press conference with vetted questions, not a moderated panel with diplomatic handlers. A one-on-one, unscripted, no time limit, no safety net global broadcast. The White House believed a proven Wall Street operator would expose Carney as a politician out of his depth. The White House was raw. What unfolded over the next 41 minutes is now being called the most devastating public dismantling of a senior government official in modern diplomatic history. But to understand the scale of the damage, you have to understand who the White House sent and who they sent him to face. Howard Lutnick is a genuine success story. Aggressive, articulate, comfortable under pressure. He built his reputation on being the smartest person in the room during billion-dollar financial negotiations. The White House believed that, against a politician who learned economics for the job, Lutnick would dominate. The problem is that Mark Carney is not a politician who learned economics. He is an economist who entered politics after reaching the absolute summit of the global financial system. A PhD in economics from Oxford, 13 years at Goldman Sachs, rising to managing director, governor of the Bank of Canada, where he steered the country through the 2008 financial crisis better than any other advanced economy. Then governor of the Bank of England, the first and only non-British citizen ever appointed to that role, chairman of the Financial Stability Board, effectively the chief architect of post-crisis global financial regulation. The White House sent a man who made money on Wall Street to debate a man who regulated Wall Street, governed 2 central banks, and redesigned the global financial system. The mismatch was not a matter of preparation, it was a matter of universes. The broadcast opened with 2 minutes each for an opening statement. Lutnick went first, aggressive, confident. He argued that the United States is Canada's largest trading partner, its largest source of foreign investment, its most important security guarantor. He cited America's GDP, its military spending, its consumer market. He painted a picture of a superpower that Canada could not afford to alienate. For 2 minutes, if you knew nothing about economics, he sounded like he was winning. Then Carney spoke, and from his first sentence, the temperature in the room changed. Carney was quiet, measured, devastatingly specific. He did not raise his voice. He did not attack. He simply began reciting numbers. Verifiable source numbers that dismantled every claim Lutnick had just made. He noted that while the United States is Canada's largest trading partner, Canada is also the largest export destination for the United States, purchasing more American goods than China and Japan combined. He noted that the United States runs a services surplus with Canada of over $28 billion annually. He noted that Canadian energy exports, currently suspended, had been saving American consumers over $40 billion per year, compared to alternative global sources, and that the suspension had already cost American households an estimated $19 billion in increased energy costs. He noted that Canadian critical minerals, also suspended, supply over 60% of the rare earth elements used in American defense manufacturing, and that the Pentagon has formally assessed the suspension as a critical vulnerability. Each number landed like a brick through a window. The first exchange after opening statements set the pattern for the remaining 37 minutes. Lutnick attempted to reframe the crisis as Canadian aggression, arguing that the energy suspension, the diplomatic severance, and the trade realignment were disproportionate responses to normal trade negotiations. Carney responded by listing, chronologically and with dates, every American action that had preceded Canada's responses: the initial tariffs, the demand for the Prime Minister's resignation, the steel ultimatum. He presented them as a sequence, each one an escalation by Washington. Each Canadian response a reaction to a specific American provocation. Then he asked Lutnick directly, which of these responses would you characterize as the first move? I'll wait. Lutnick paused. He began to respond, stopped, began again, and then pivoted to a different argument entirely. A pivot that every viewer, every analyst, and every diplomat watching understood as the moment he realized he could not answer the question without admitting that the United States had started every round of escalation. That pivot happened at the 6-minute mark. There were 35 minutes left. The middle section of the debate was an extended exercise in asymmetric warfare. Lutnick attacking with talking points, Carney defending with data. The gap between them growing more visible and more excruciating with every exchange. Lutnick argued that the Democratic Commerce Alliance was an anti-American trade bloc. Carney calmly read the alliance's founding charter, which explicitly welcomes American participation and contains no exclusionary provisions, and then asked, if it's anti-American, why does the membership clause specifically invite American participation? Have you read the charter, Secretary Lutnick? Lutnick had not read the charter. His silence confirmed it. Lutnick argued that Canadian steel companies would eventually come crawling back to the American market once tariff pressure forced economic reality. Carney pulled up a tablet visible on camera. He displayed binding 10-year supply agreements with DCA nations, capital investment figures for production line retooling, forward contract volumes locking Canadian steel into European and Asian markets through 2036. He said, "These are signed contracts, secretary binding. 10-year with penalty clauses for early termination. The steel isn't coming back because it can't. The capital has been deployed. The specifications have been changed. The customers have been locked in. This isn't a negotiating position. This is industrial physics." Lutnick's response, "Well, we'll see about that." Delivered with the confidence of a man performing, assurance rather than experiencing it. The global audience could see the difference. Lutnick then tried the emotional angle, the approach the White House believed would be most effective against what they called Carney's cold, technocratic style. He spoke about American workers, American families, American communities suffering because of Canada's punitive actions, factory closures, energy bills, construction delays. He spoke with genuine feeling, and for a brief moment the emotional gravity seemed to shift the dynamic. Then Carney responded, and his response was a masterclass in turning an emotional appeal against the person making it. "Secretary Lutnick, I want to take your concern for American workers seriously because I share it. So, let's look at the numbers. The steel tariff your president signed, not Canada's response. Your president's executive order has increased American home construction cost by an average of $53,000 per unit. Your president's tariff, the energy suspension, which is a response to your president's demand that I resign, is costing American households $19 billion this year. Your president's demand, the airspace closure, a response to the diplomatic severance your president initiated, is costing American airlines $3.2 billion annually. Your president's severance, every cost you just described to these American workers and families, is a cost imposed on them, not by Canada, but by the decisions of your own administration. I have the receipts. Would you like me to continue, or would you prefer to tell American workers who is actually responsible for their suffering?" The moderator later said this was the moment she knew the debate was over. Not because of the content, but because of Lutnick's face, which had shifted from controlled confidence to the expression of a man who has just realized he is in a fight he cannot win and there is no exit. And then came the moment that will be studied in negotiation courses for a decade. At approximately the 31-minute mark, Lutnick attempted a final pivot. He framed the debate itself as evidence of American good faith. "The fact that I'm here, Mr. Prime Minister, shows that America is willing to engage. We're at the table. We're ready to talk. We want a path forward." It was, as a rhetorical move, his strongest of the evening. Carney listened, nodded slightly, and then asked a question. 7 words delivered, with the quiet precision of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "What exactly are you offering Canada today?" Silence. Lutnick opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His eyes moved left, right, down. The involuntary eye movement of someone searching for an answer that does not exist. The silence lasted approximately 8 seconds. In live television, that is an eternity. A void so complete that 90 million viewers could hear the ventilation system in the BBC studio because the answer was nothing. Lutnick had no offer. The United States had no proposal, no framework for resolution, no concession, no path forward. The White House had sent their sharpest economic mind to a global broadcast, not to negotiate, but to argue, to score points, to project strength, to perform engagement without the substance of engagement. Carney's 7-word question had stripped that performance bare, exposing the emptiness beneath it in a way no amount of talking points could disguise. Real-time social media analytics showed the single highest spike in engagement activity ever recorded during a live political broadcast. Over 400,000 posts on one platform, alone in the 60 seconds following the question. The most shared real-time commentary came from a former United States Trade Representative, a Republican appointee who posted a single sentence. He doesn't have an answer because there isn't an answer. We never made one. Carney let the silence do its work. He did not fill it. He did not mock. He did not press. He waited 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 8 seconds with the patience of someone who understood that the silence was more eloquent than any words he could add. And then, when the silence had communicated everything it needed to communicate, he leaned slightly forward, looked directly at Lutnick, and delivered 5 words in the same quiet, devastating register. Send someone who can say yes. The broadcast continued for another 9 minutes, but it was over. Lutnick attempted 2 more arguments, both perfunctory. Both met with responses from Carney that were almost gentle in their brevity. The responses of a man who had already won and was simply running out the clock. The moderator wrapped the discussion. The cameras cut and the 5 words began their journey into the lexicon of this crisis. Within 20 minutes, send someone who can say yes was the top trending phrase on every major social media platform globally. Within an hour, it was the headline on every major newspaper's digital edition. International media called it the sentence that ended the last American argument for engagement because it exposed with surgical precision the fundamental problem that had defined the American approach from the beginning. The United States had spent 18 months arguing, threatening, demanding, performing, and escalating. But at no point had it made an offer. It had never proposed a resolution, never laid out terms, never put a path forward on the table. Carney's 5 words revealed what Lutnick's 8 seconds of silence confirmed. There was no plan. There had never been a plan. There was only force, and force without a plan is not strategy. It is tantrum. President Trump watched the broadcast, lived from the residence with a group of senior advisors. According to 4 people in the room, he didn't make it to the end. He left at approximately the 32-minute mark. Immediately after the "what exactly are you offering Canada today?" exchange before the 5-word line was even delivered. According to 2 sources, he swept a stack of briefing materials off a side table as he stood. According to a third, he turned to the chief of staff and said at a volume audible to everyone in the room, "That's the guy you told me would win. That's the sharpest mind in the cabinet." He got destroyed on live television in front of the entire world by a guy who runs a country the size of California. Get him off my TV, get him out of my cabinet, and find me somebody who can beat Carney, because apparently nobody in this building can. The irony of that last demand was not lost on the advisors in the room. They had already sent the person they believed was their best. There was no one else. The bench was empty. The deepest strategic crisis in a generation was being managed by an administration that had just discovered on live television in front of 90 million people that it did not have a single official capable of going toe-to-toe with the leader of its most important ally on the substance of the crisis it had created. One senior advisor later told a colleague he kept asking who we could send next. "We went through names. Treasury, State, NSC, trade envoys. For every name, someone had a reason it wouldn't work. The trade rep doesn't have the presence. The Treasury Secretary doesn't know the Canada file well enough. The Secretary of State has no economic credibility. We went around the table 3 times. Then someone said the thing nobody wanted to say. The only person who could credibly face Carney was the president himself. And everyone in the room knew that was impossible. Not because of scheduling, because of capability." What followed inside the White House over the next 48 hours was described by multiple officials as institutional paralysis. The debate had not just embarrassed Lutnick. It had exposed a void at the center of the administration's approach to the entire Canadian crisis. For 18 months, the strategy had been escalation. Tariffs, demands, ultimatums, executive orders, each designed to pressure Canada into compliance through sheer economic force. At no point had anyone in the administration developed a substantive proposal for resolution, a package of terms that could be presented to Canada as the basis for negotiation. When Carney asked, "What exactly are you offering?" the question wasn't just directed at Lutnick. It was directed at the entire United States government. And the answer, as the silence confirmed, was that there was nothing. No offer, no proposal, no framework. The realization spreading through the State Department, the Treasury, the Commerce Department, and the National Security Council simultaneously was sickening in its clarity. The United States had spent 18 months escalating a crisis with its most important trading partner and closest ally, and had never at any point developed terms for ending it. The escalation was not a means to an end. It was the end. And now, with the world watching, that truth had been exposed on live television by a 7-word question and 8 seconds of silence. The international reaction moved at a velocity that reflected the stakes every nation saw in the outcome. The European Commission President issued a statement within 4 hours praising Carney's substantive data-driven approach and pointedly noting that the Democratic Commerce Alliance welcomes engagement from all parties who come to the table with concrete proposals, a sentence whose conditional clause was a direct and unmistakable reference to the 7-word question that had defined the debate. Japan's trade minister called the debate clarifying and announced an acceleration of Japan's timeline for full DCA integration. The United Kingdom's Foreign Secretary said the debate underscored the urgency of building resilient economic frameworks that do not depend on the policy stability of any single partner. Language that translated from diplomatic English meant we can no longer rely on the United States. India, which had requested observer status after the Steel Ultimatum, formally applied for full membership within 48 hours of the debate. The DCA now counts 16 full members and 3 observers, representing collectively over 52% of global GDP. Each American era has added members. The debate was no exception. Inside the United States, the domestic political crisis reached a depth that polling suggests is now structural rather than episodic. A national poll conducted within 72 hours of the debate found that 61% of Americans had watched at least some portion of the broadcast or seen clips. Of those, 67% said Carney had clearly won. More damaging than the headline number was the partisan breakdown. Among self-identified Republican voters, 38% acknowledged that Carney had outperformed Lutnick, the first time a significant share of the president's own base had broken with the administration's framing of the Canadian crisis. Editorial boards of major American newspapers, including several that had supported the administration's trade posture in its early stages, published pieces calling the debate a national embarrassment. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board wrote that the debate had revealed a strategic vacuum at the heart of American trade policy that is costing American businesses, American workers, and American credibility by the hour. 9 Republican senators now publicly oppose the administration's approach to Canada, with 2 additional senators saying privately that they are preparing to introduce legislation requiring the administration to submit a formal resolution proposal to Congress within 30 days. American business leaders responded not with anger, but with something closer to resignation. The exhausted recognition that the administration could not be expected to resolve a crisis it did not understand well enough to debate on live television. The business round held a press conference in which the chair said directly, "We have been asking the White House for a resolution plan for 6 months. After last night, we understand why we haven't received one. There isn't one. There has never been one, and we can no longer wait for one. American businesses will begin engaging directly with the Democratic Commerce Alliance framework to protect their supply chains, their workers, and their long-term competitiveness with or without the support of an administration that has demonstrated it is unable to engage substantively with the most important economic crisis of our time." That statement, American business formally giving up on the administration and engaging with the DCA independently, represented a fracture in the domestic coalition that analysts described as irreparable within this presidential term. The S&P 500 dropped nearly 3% in the 72 hours following the debate. The energy suspension, now in its 4th month, has cost American consumers an estimated $31 billion in increased costs. The steel tariff is increasing American construction costs by an estimated $53,000 per home, and the Democratic Commerce Alliance, which did not exist 18 months ago, now encompasses over half the global economy, with American businesses beginning to join it independently because their own government cannot articulate a competing vision. The most integrated economic relationship in human history, the U.S.-Canada partnership built over a century and a half, is unraveling, not in a single dramatic break, but in a slow compounding cascade of self-inflicted wounds, each one making the next one worse, each one closing a door that cannot be reopened. Donald Trump sent his Commerce Secretary, the man the White House called the sharpest economic mind in the cabinet, to confront Mark Carney on live international television. And Carney dismantled him so completely that the broadcast is now being studied as a case study in asymmetric intellectual warfare. In 41 minutes, Lutnick failed to counter a single data point Carney presented, failed to answer a 7-word question that exposed the absence of any American proposal for resolution, sat in 8 seconds of silence that told 90 million viewers everything they needed to know about the strategic void at the center of the world's most powerful government. Carney ended the debate with 5 words: send someone who can say yes. The White House still has not sent anyone. The chair remains empty. The world has seen it. And somewhere in Ottawa, a man who is supposed to be broken by American pressure is sitting quietly waiting for someone who can say yes. He is still waiting. Please hit the bell icon and subscribe my channel for daily updates.